Hi. Speech and language therapists around the world rely on normative data on phonological development, in particular, phonological patterns, to differentiate children with typically developing speech from children with speech sound disorders. Such data are not yet sufficiently available for Saudi Hejazi-Arabic speaking children. Kirk and Vigeland 2015 defined phonological patterns or processes as a phonological variation that occurs rule like in a child's speech. In order for speech language therapists to base their speech diagnosis on phonological patterns, such patterns need to be well defined and identified based on reliable cutoff criteria. Both are unfortunately not necessarily the case. Many studies use broadly defined pattern terms and no empirically derived cutoff criterion to distinguish patterns from infrequent phonological variations has yet been agreed. While many studies consider a phonological variation a pattern if it occurs at least 4 times in a child's speech based on data from McRonald and Elbert 1981, this cutoff criteria is arbitrary. It might also be too low for certain phonological variations, resulting in certain phonological variations being labeled as developmental patterns while they are not. Therefore, the aim of this present study was to evaluate phonological development based on change in phonological variations in Saudi Hijazi Arabic speaking children aged between 2.5 and 5'11", and to identify typical developmental patterns versus infrequent variants with applying two cutoff criteria. The phonological variation were considered patterns if they were occur at least 4 or 6 times in a child's speech. Culturally and linguistically appropriate single word naming assessment tool was developed specifically for this study and used to assess 240 Saudi Hijazi Arabic speaking children aged between 2.5 and 5'11", divided into 7 age group with a 6-month age band. All speech data were broadly transcribed using broad IBA and entered into phone software with audio files. However, the data presented for this study were not run within phone. Transcripts for each child were extracted from phone to identify and label phonological variations not in line with the target word. These variations were then analyzed regarding tokens and types of phonological patterns, as well as infrequent variants, which are phonologically variations not occurring often enough to be counted as patterns. As I said earlier, the two cutoff criteria were used to distinguish patterns from infrequent variants. All phonological variances that did not meet the applied cutoff criterion were considered infrequent variances. As a next step, phonological patterns were defined as developmental for an age group if they occurred more than 10% of the children in that age group. As you can see in Table 1, overall, Saudi Hijazi children showed a comparably high number of phonological variations up to the age of 5-11, and as expected, the number of phonological tokens and types, as well as infrequent variances, decreased with age. By looking at Table 2, there are 23 phonological patterns, 18 systemic simplifications, and 5 structural simplifications, and 3 phonetic error patterns emerged. Only 3 of these phonological patterns, the fronting sh and j, the voicing and vowel substitutions, plus 1 phonetic distortion, which is phonetic distortion of fricatives, occurred across all age groups and in both cutoff criteria. While the occurrence frequency reduced with increasing age, it remained comparably high until 5-11. Children had overcome all structural simplification by age 4-11, but some systemic simplification, which are fronting shahja, assimilation, devoicing, substitutes dah with vah, and vowel substitutions, were still observed in the oldest age group for either both cutoffs or only the lower cutoff criterion. Two further phonological patterns, denasalization and vowel deletion, occurred only for the lower cutoff and in the youngest one or two age groups. One phonological pattern, substitute dah with dha, seems to actually increase with age, which might be related to standard Arabic acquisition by this age group. Our few findings, not in line with other Arabic studies, might be the result of dialectal features or reflect the use of different criteria, cutoff, and or patterns definitions across studies. The large number of phonological variations not counted as patterns, which is the phonological infrequent variant, confirm the importance of distinguishing between patterns and infrequent variants when studying phonological development. Our differences in finding for the two cutoff criteria highlight the dependence of patterns identified by studies from the arbitrary cutoff used, and question whether patterns only emerging with lower cutoff are indeed developmental patterns. We hope you find this poster helpful. Thank you for your listening and best wishes from Dima, Turkey.